final report for entomology 322, honeybee biology, and beekeeping. I'm doing the report. I chose to interview Trevor. He is a owner and operator of a small farm, and he uses bees on the farm. And thanks so much for being here, buddy. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Brian.
Let's see. Tell me about Whiskey Fork Farms CSA.
So we're a small farm that is specializing in vegetable CSA production, and we branch out into a little bit of meat production here and there, and have from the beginning had a pretty strong interest in producing as much of our inputs as possible on the farm, and part of the model of a CSA with the subscription service that people prepay for is, we fight a lot of variables throughout the season, and we try to mitigate as many variables as we can by some of the operations we have in place, like the bees.
Okay, awesome. So you said it's a subscription-based service, so they're going to give you their money up front, and in exchange, you're going to provide them with sort of essentially a basket of produce throughout the season?
Yep. So we have the model we used this last season was a 20-week delivery.
Okay.
Started in July and went through most of October. Kind of the peak growing season. We hope to be able to branch into early season and late season stuff, but don't have as much infrastructure for that. And primarily we're looking at providing people with an alternative to just a farmer's market or just a grocery store.
Okay, awesome. And bees. Tell me about bees. What's your history with bees?
Yeah. So when we started getting into the food production, we also became aware of the bee issue and decreased pollinator numbers, and it was about the same time that colony collapse sort of first hit the scene, whenever that was 10 years ago. And we decided pretty soon into the operation that we needed to control as many variables, like I had mentioned before, as possible, and bees becoming readily apparent that they were one of the most important.
Okay, awesome. What type of crops do you use the bees for? What's the role that the bee plays?
The first year that we brought in a substantial number of bees, we had native pollinators. We live in a pretty good area for that.
Okay.
But the first year that we brought substantial bee numbers, we noticed gains in most of our squash family, for sure all of our fruit trees, and even in the berries here and there.
That's awesome. And I imagine if you have a prepaid subscription upfront service, your reputation getting them to sign up next year is going to depend on you producing the most that you can and what you say you can.
It's paramount. If we have a bad week, it's the thing we lose the most sleep over. But it's also the only thing that is out of our control is severe weather patterns, hail, which we've had a few times. So by increasing our pollinator numbers with the bees on the property and being managed by us, then we've been able to make sure that our yields are that in succession planning, but make sure that our yields are where we need them for our delivery dates.
Awesome, awesome. Let's see. So when you got into beekeeping, I'm sure you didn't know anything about it. What's been the most enjoyable, interesting aspect of it?
As you know, studying bees, the biology of what's happening in a hive, whether it's native or commercially managed, European style, then it's fascinating to watch bees interact with nature.
Yeah.
They have a really amazing sense of themselves as a hive, and it's a that's been the most eye-opening learning experience. With getting into bees, I've had the opportunity to work on a commercial application as well, as a beekeeper, and seeing the process of major crop pollination and managing large numbers of bees has also been
So you did it commercially in the past, and now you're doing it on your small farm.
Correct.
When you're on your farm, how many hives do you have right now?
This year we're overwintering 16 hives.
Awesome. Okay. And tell me about the commercial. When you did it, what numbers were you working with and subletting and?
We were a smaller commercial operation, bounced between 150 and 300 hives during the peak season, and subcontracted for a much larger operation out of Corvallis actually, and they were running about 5,000 hives.
Okay.
So we would integrate our bees into their operation, and spend a lot of days working with them on all their bee yards, primarily pollinating the almond harvest in California.
California.
Yeah.
So colony collapse disorder. We talked about it. It's been a big issue. It's actually getting some media attention, which is good. It's going to provide some social pressure to fund some research and to try to figure out what's going on. From the standpoint of both the small farm and working for a commercial bee operation, what are some of the aspects of that you guys have talked about? What's the buzz? That's terribly clever. I didn't even mean to say that.
That's a good one.
Right? What's going on with colony collapse? What are some of the bigger aspects that are?
Yeah, so it hit the commercial bee keeping world by storm. Hadn't seen anything like it previously, and the numbers were devastating. And that was pre my entry into beekeeping. But even when I first got started, we were still throwing darts at a board. There were studies being held, but studies take a little while to come up with any sort of certifiable results. So you had sort of the anecdotes and the wives' tales and the seasonal change or bad weather or bad environment. A lot of people thought it was disease related initially, and now that we're seeing a lot more studies come to some form of final answer, and more people become aware of it, like you said, then we're seeing more possibilities of causing factors, and it's not just one thing, and it's not just you can't say that it's this or that.
Yeah. And that's a big thing, because the media like sound bites. They like to say, we have a problem, it's called colony collapse disorder.
It's a great name for a scary thing that nobody knows anything about.
But what it really means is that the symptoms are colony collapsing. There's a multitude of things that cause it. One of the big ones that I've learned about is the varroa mite. Is that something you guys are dealing with? Small farm, commercial? What do you know?
Yeah, so it was definitely part of the program in the commercial operation.
Okay.
It's doing mite checks every season, and pretty much treating for varroa mites, even if the check numbers are a little on the lower side of the threshold.
Okay.
It's the commercial aspect is kind of, you're just gonna always try to stay ahead of the game.
Okay.
From our aspect on the small farm, and really just worrying about our personal pollination and not traveling with the bees, we have taken we still do mite checks, and I still see mites, but the loads are pretty low. And there's some discussion of varroa mites being a native predator of bees. Anyways, and it is what it is.
Yeah.
If we're not treating,
Yeah.
then we also maybe are building a stronger population of bees who are more resilient against them. That's also not scientifically proven, but is a theory.
But it seems that theory falls in line with your more control the inputs holistic approach to your farm and to your vegetable approaches.
Yeah, it fits in with our business model as a farm and our sort of ethos of how we want to go about things
That's
more.
awesome.
And so,
And also, you mentioned something that was interesting. You said that when your bees aren't traveling and joining other bees and other groups, you can control the variables to a much higher level.
absolutely, our bees are traveling a fairly extensive 2-mile radius, but that's about it. We're not seeing a whole lot of transcontinental packaging and shipping. So,
Your bees don't bring postcards from Central California, almond fields.
if they did, it would be really cool. But so that's sort of our Varroa mite, and that was something that a lot of people contributed as a major cause of CCD. But
Yeah, and the Varroa mite, of course, brings with it other infections and problems.
Nosema, which is another one, that you see a lot more in a commercial application. You don't see as much in a small farm application. As a matter of fact, I have never had Nosema on our farm hives, whereas we'd run into it pretty much every winter in the commercial application. So it, not to say that this was something that got tossed around too, that colony collapse disorder was directly linked to the commercial manipulation of bees, and I don't believe that that's 100% accurate either. It's just having seen both sides that there are more prevalent cases of it when you're dealing with higher number concentrations and more
I think it's interesting that
crossbreeding.
Yeah, the media says there's this thing called colony collapse disorder, and the first thing that you say is it's a number of factors, and the one aspect that you see a lot of it's being pinned on. The one aspect that's being demonized is the commercial bee use, because it's not a natural thing to ship bees and get them so much together. And your second sentence after mentioning that was, and that's not 100% the problem either. It's just so varied that you don't ever, you can't take a pill to fix the illness. It doesn't work that way.
No, colony collapse disorder is a symptom of a long agricultural way of doing things, and I don't think that that's necessarily bad. It's just something that we've come up with and it has come up, and we will adapt to and figure out a way around or a way to interact with or mitigate where possible.
And just like with, you were telling me before we started rolling here, but Varroa mites, it sounds like a horrible thing, but your goal isn't to eradicate them.
It's almost impossible. You can't make sure that there's no mite load. It's
just stay ahead of the curve, ahead of the wave. Say.
Yeah.
Right on. Any advice that you'd have for, say, somebody who was a small farmer and thinking that they wanted to implement a beekeeping system to help them, or just somebody who wanted to get a hive as a hobby, somebody thinking of starting out, any thoughts or advice you'd give them?
Do it, absolutely. It's rewarding, it's challenging, it's fun, it's a lot of hard work.
And we haven't even talked about honey once.
Yeah. This is just pollination aspect, and having the bees around. It's funny, when I was working in the commercial application in the early spring when our bees were in California, we'd be still doing stuff around the bee yards and prepping stuff for the season, and you'd actually miss the bees being around. We're so used to having bees on our farm now that if we were to take the hives off, I feel like it'd be a major chunk of the overall farm, and that's just watching bee activity. But to a new beekeeper or somebody who's interested in just a backyard hive or a small farm or medium-sized farm who's thinking about a way to, you know, sort of vertically integrate their own pollinator population, it's incredibly rewarding. It's hard work. They actually, once you've made the decision, just like any other livestock, once you've made the decision to domesticate it and to be its protector and provider, then that is the case. You now are.
Yeah, you have a contract. The moment they arrive, they help you without knowing it, and you are they're completely dependent on you for a list of things.
Absolutely. You know, when a hive that's mismanaged swarms and those bees take off into the wild, a lot of people sort of say, oh, that's good for native bee populations or, you know, native pollinator numbers. But in a lot of respects, it's just like releasing a cow that's been in domestic control for years. That thing, it's not going to revert back to its wild ways immediately. And sadly, you see a lot of swarms, you know,
that don't make it.
That, you know, and that's also not scientific. It's just sort of anecdotal of what you see out there. And so, as a beekeeper, you know, managing your bee numbers and whether that, you know, is adding more hives and, you know, continuing to allow your bees to grow, which is what they naturally want to do, or keeping it in a manageable number for you yourself, that's a decision you have to make, and it's one that you have to take seriously. And that's probably the only word of caution, is just make sure you realize that it's a self-propagating system, and so once you're started, you're on kind of a roller coaster ride, depending on what your goals for it are.
Yeah, you get a milking cow, you don't show up one day, and there's 2 milking cows, right?
Right. Or tell the milking cow to stop milking.
It's true.
You know,
it's a good analogy. Yeah.
And so those are your, you know, that's the challenge with bees. But so far, it's been incredibly rewarding for us, and we've really appreciated the joy of having the bees and their real world, what's the word I'm looking for? Bounty. That's the bounty of the harvest with having the bees on the property.
You can see a direct.
Absolutely. Our apple trees, we have pretty old apple orchard on the property, way predating us, and with a little bit of you know, restructuring and the pruning, and then the bees, we've just seen, you know, the trees are right back to where they were probably 40 years ago.
That's awesome.
Things like that, you know, working in sync with nature, and the observational qualities of any good farmer, you know, to pay attention to what's going on around him and to you know, adapt to those variables. Bees really help you get in tune with.
That's cool. That's a good way of looking at it. Through the bees, you can sense what's going on in the ecosystem, and that sounds awesome. So hey, apples and honey, meat and vegetables, if that sounds good to you, go to whiskeyforkfarms.com, whoever happens to see this, and check it out and see if you want to join up. I'm sure you've got a few slots. When do you take orders?
We'll start the season in January for 2015.
Okay.
Is when the sign-ups will start.
Orders starting in January. I'm Brian Hill, again, for Entomology 322. This is my final report. This is Trevor from Whiskey Fork Farms. Thank you, brother, for coming. I really appreciate your giving me some time and some knowledge, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Tell a little story and it won't take long about a lazy farmer who wouldn't hoe his corn.